Okay, so what should we talk about?
Mhm. I know.
I I blame I blame Napoleon today for
Having brain fart.
yeah.
Um,
Let's see.
um, we got things, but what things we want y'all to know. It's-
Um,
mhm.
like what was I talking about last night? Oh, well, I mean, what was it? We were talking about in that chapter of is it the seven principles?
Yes.
Yeah. All I remember from reading was how couples will have like completely different opinions or views on things that like you can't help but compromise with. Like one person wants to have children, the other one doesn't. You have to figure out how to make that work. And then dreams and how do you get to the same place and all that stuff. Um,
Yes. Um,
like I'd say like most relationships and marriages have a lot of compromise, but for some reason nowadays, like people don't think that that's the way it should be. Like I shouldn't have to change anything, or I shouldn't have to live my life in such a way that like I have to give up like being comfortable or like going to school or my job. Like everybody just thinks that like it should all just work somehow.
right. It was overcoming gridlock. That was like the
Yeah.
chapter.
Yeah.
And it was talking about how couples fall into gridlock, and how basically it's where neither side can come to a productive resolution.
Yeah.
And having genuine conversations. Yeah. But I do think a lot of people don't realize um the compromises that it takes. I also think one of the things that I took away from that book was the um basically seeing nurturing the friendship of your partnership and wanting to make it work. I think a lot of couples fight for their side
Yeah.
instead of fighting for each other. Like, if you really want something to work, you're going to fight to make it work and come to an agreement with your partner and see the best in them as opposed to being on opposite sides of the court, so to speak.
And that's why I've told people a lot that to me you need to care more about others than yourself. Like if you want to look at a percentage, like almost like having controlling interest, like you need to be at least 51% more interested in other people than yourself. Because if you're always more interested in yourself, that's probably not going to work out for you in the long run, my opinion. But at because you still have to take care of yourself. You still have to, work on yourself. But I think it was John Lovell that I think I shared with you where he said that you
Oh,
need to
yeah.
care more about your you need to I don't believe he used the word care, but I would say I'm paraphrasing. You need to care more about your wife than your children, and you need to care more about you need you need to care more about God than your wife. It goes basically God, wife, children, where God's the most important thing, the next important is your wife, and the last is your children. And um
Yeah.
that was that whole thing. I think we talked about it. And then you got into mom guilt when we were talking about that and how yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a hierarchy where like that you have to put God first and you have to make him the most important thing, or she, however you want to look at God, and then your spouse and then your children. Because I think nowadays people they don't put God first really in any way, and their spouse gets a back seat to their children. which I kind of understand like why people do that. But again, it's overcoming that and it's every day like remembering who's the most important and who takes precedence. But
Yeah, like the some couples or some people are talking about like loving your kids more than your spouse and how
yeah,
oh, I'll never love my husband as much as I love my kids, or I understand my wife will not see me the same way or look at me the same way that she looks at our children. And that's interesting to me because um those are two different things. It's like apples and oranges. Like you really can't compare the love you have for your man to the love you have for your kids in my mind. Those are two equally important things, but they're separate things. And I think this is going
yeah,
into this idea of self-importance
right.
that people have, where women are taught, oh, you need to not lose yourself in a relationship and you need to be an individual, which is true. You need to be healthy as a person and whole as a person. But there is also this point where us becomes bigger than the individual parts, in
Mm.
my the way I'm thinking. I don't know how you see it.
Well, it's like how and this sounds very because I work with women. I'm sure you've work with men and have worked with men, but like I prefer not to work with women mostly because like and by work with I mean like alongside. I don't mind having a manager who's a woman or a CEO or anything. But like working hand in hand with someone, I prefer men just because it's more comfortable at the end of the day, to me, and it's more professional. Like it can get very inappropriate very quickly,
Oh, and it's
what your job is, and
oh,
when people are interacting with each other. But I can't understand why everybody like has this attitude of like women especially like I can have male friends, and I'm like all and it sound and again I used to be on the fence about it and I kind of am still about like there's this trope or this like idea that if you have male friends as a woman all those male friends are secretly pining for you and want to sleep with you. They're like waiting in line, and a part of me is like nah, that's not true. Like you can just be friends with someone and it doesn't have to be sexual, which is true, but at the same time you have to ask yourself like why are you friends with that person?
mhm.
And I there's not a whole lot of reason for me to have a lot of female friends. Again, unless they're very masculine and like the things that like they like to hunt, fish, work on things, blah, blah, blah. Like, case in point, it's very strange for me to see women in the military that are in this very masculine role, but then they want to be feminine in some ways. And I'm like, that's not, this isn't the place for that. Like, if we're not working, I get it. Wear your makeup and, but, you know, like to put it in short, the battlefield isn't really the place to be
Feminine.
feminine. And I know that could be controversial to a lot of people, me
Well, it's
saying
just
that.
reality. I think
But
it's
if you've ever been in the military in like a training scenario for like a month or longer, or been on a deployment, you're gonna know that like it's not about like necessarily like being emotional and talking about your feelings all the time and everything. You just kind of have to like put all that to the wayside for the time being. And anyway, but but yeah, I going back to the females and everything. Like I think that for instance, can't see myself having any kind of like affection for a woman outside of like just like friendliness, not even like friends, like friendliness, like being civilized. Because like whether it be my mother, my sister, or you, like I can't really say like I love a lot of other women in the context of like family or even romantic love.
Mhm.
Or even if we have a daughter, like it's one of those things that like you were saying earlier, those are all completely different. My sister, my mom, you, and if we have a daughter, like all those relationships are different. But I can't see like why um people can't see the temptation or the need to just like exclude other people from your life. Again, I'm not saying like I'm gonna anytime I walk past a woman, I'm like, get away from me. Like, I don't want to talk to you. Like, I have a like the joke of like any woman who wants to talk to me, like, excuse me, can I? I'm like, I have a wife. Thank you very much. I have a wife.
Yeah, that's what you do.
Like, yeah, like that's I'm not gonna interact like that with every woman.
Right.
But I'm not gonna want but like for instance, yeah, I think it's very bad to see someone who's not your spouse for a long period of time. I think that's how like my dad got tempted
Mm.
by another woman. Then my parents got divorced. But I think that's what happened. My dad was like he was spending more time and putting more energy, if you want to call it that, into another person, and that just caused this rift. And
So
I'm not saying that's forever. That's going to happen to anyone who like has a friend that's not
but
their
the
spouse.
temptation is there, especially when you're
Yeah.
calling it friendship. You know, the
Mm-hmm.
Bible talks about like men and women treat the women as a sister.
Mm-hmm.
So to your point, I think a lot of guys who are like, men and women can't be friends. You know, so the only
Yeah.
the only relationship you can have with a woman is one that's sexual or romantic. I don't think that's what is rightful either. I think that
Right.
it's also this idea that do you have a sister? I mean, that's what like I get on these social medias when they post that because they're posting it to cause an uproar. But do you have a sister? Because do you know what it's like to have a brother-sister relationship? Because you can benefit from a feminine in your life that's not your wife, not your mom. Okay, you
Right.
can, as long as it's done in a way that's like a sister as opposed to buddies. You know, I don't have
Yeah.
any guys that I'm buddies with. You
Yeah.
know, we're not buddy buddies. They're like brothers in Christ. They look over me. They watch out for me from a
Mhm.
distance.
Yeah.
We're not buddies. We don't go out to lunch.
Yeah.
You know? So, yeah,
Well,
that's my
exactly. And that's why like if I would say if I ever was close with another woman outside of my family, it would probably only be because I'm really good friends with that person's husband.
yeah,
And um and when I think about like the only women that I would call my friends, they're all married and I'm very close with their husbands. So it's like I don't really see myself like meeting a stranger and being like, oh, you're a really nice person, we should be friends. Like, and you happen to be a woman. Like I don't ever see myself coming across that because again, at the end of the day, I don't understand one, why anyone would want to be with anyone other than their spouse. I know that sounds crazy. Like you just want to be stuck with one person forever and only spend time with that one person for eternity. Um, but I mean, if you can't commit to that, like I don't understand the point of like the marriage at the end of the day. But also that kind of goes back into like this idea that because I've had this argument with a lot of women on the line at least, but I don't understand how like you can be in any kind of relationship with a man and then like romantic anything beyond friendship and then like out of nowhere just backpedal and be like no, we'll just be friends. Like that's never made sense to me because I'm like, well, you're saying that there's no romantic interest there. So why do you need to keep them in your life? Like why do you want to keep that person around? That's the
yeah.
part that doesn't make sense to me, and it never will. Um,
Especially after you've had intimate knowledge of
yeah.
that person, slept together. How are you
Mhm.
supposed to be friends?
Well,
But
or you just see that person as more than just a friend. Like you have romantic feelings and attachments to them. Um,
yeah,
I well, and the most intimate of all would be intercourse, but yeah, I can't understand. Like anytime I ever like pursued a woman, uh, and they were just like when I finally was like, I love you, and they're like, that's nice, but I don't want to. Almost every time it would be like, I don't want to ruin our friendship or whatever the fuck they would say. Excuse my language, but I'm like, okay, and then I just like cut them out of my life. I'm like, all right, meh, and I just like moved on. And
mhm,
to a lot of people, that's a bit extreme, but to me, like that's probably the healthiest thing you could do is just be like, whatever, and just move on with your life. As opposed to, I don't think a lot of women know this, but like guys can be very resentful and hung up on women. And I I don't think that you should just jump from woman to woman like a lot of men do. Um, in
Mhm.
life where you're just like, well, that was a fun Saturday night. Can't wait to see what the world throws, what woman the world provides next Saturday. Like, I'm not saying that, but you do need to have a understanding that like it's best to just let things go and let people go in life, like because you're not always going to be able to like keep them around. So it's best to just appreciate them. In this
Mhm.
case, like an ex, appreciate what you had and just move on and
Right,
not get hung up on it.
right. I think there's benefits to that,
Yeah.
but
And
people
it's
hold,
hard. Like it's hard sometimes.
yeah, yeah, people hold on for a reason, I think, though, subconsciously. This is just
Mm.
my psychotherapist coming out, but I think people, I think people hold on for a reason just to have that backup or the what if
Yeah.
they, they might can get something out of it later.
Well, and I think that like women who hold on to male friends or they take romantic interested men and keep them around as friends. I think that I don't have any kind of understanding of psychology of relationships, but like I would say that like those women are holding on to men because they have this like overly unhealthy need for like attention and from men particularly. Because again, I don't understand like why you need that, you know. Um, same thing with men actually. Like I've often asked like two men like why do you need to go around and like have so many sexual partners? And I never really get a clear-cut answer. It's usually just like, it's I don't want to settle or I don't want to whatever. And it's a very shallow answer at
Mhm.
the end of the day. I mean, it's the same thing for people like arguing for polyamorous relationships where they're like, oh, well, like we love each other that I want the world to experience my partner. And I'm like, that's gross. It's like, okay, like I don't understand that now because the argument I always heard from my mother was now imagine that's your son or daughter, and as soon as you do that, like you're like, okay, yeah, I wouldn't want them doing that. Um,
Right. Right. That's a good one. Mama Owen.
yeah, like yeah, because I'm like, oh, okay, no, that's fair. Like I wouldn't want that to happen. Um,
Of course not.
but
But
then again, like I've met women who are like, what would you call them, like adult entertainers who like I've asked them, I'm like, would you want your daughter doing this? And they're like, what, why wouldn't I? With like this sassy attitude. And I'm like, I don't know, because there's better things to do with your time than like put your butt on social, like your bare butt on social media and like
can we
tell
imagine that?
people like come to the lounge to throw money in my face like that. That just doesn't seem like a very respectable way to earn a living. Just like it's more respectable to be more clothed than it is to be unclothed. But I mean, again, that's social norms and perspective that are changing with every passing day. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's changing because it's speaking to people's woundedness, their wounds, their common trauma, the trauma bonds that exceed, how people have trauma bonds, which basically is you're in a relationship, like usually romantic with someone because you both have similar traumas,
Right.
where you've been through something together. That's trauma bonding.
Mm.
Uh, like on Speed, you know, Sandra Bullock encountered. Okay,
Oh, I
anyway.
thought you meant the drug for a second.
Oh yeah,
Like, I'm sure
that
you could bond through doing speed together.
you could. You could actually, but um yeah.
I mean, I
Trauma.
guess that trauma bonding, is that something akin to like Stockholm syndrome, where you're in a certain state of mind that like you just form an attack?
Well, the difference between those two is that Stockholm syndrome, there's someone that has authority or in a state of power over somebody else. But trauma bonding is really equal. It's just your bond together is based on some wound or
Shared,
trauma.
shared trauma.
Yeah, and I think
Oh,
that that exceeds to the whole human psyche of people are dissatisfied with their lives for whatever reason. So they're looking on social media for answers and they see freedom or liberation or some sort of answer in the OnlyFans, I'm gonna be a hoe on purpose type of lifestyle that's
Right.
empowering. Because they're
Right.
looking for power, they're looking for identity, which is why a lot of the work that I do, especially with women,
Right.
um, is about identity because there's confusion there. Whereas with men, it's kind of like they know, they just need me to affirm it, if that makes sense. That God has, even if they're not Christian, but if they are, that makes it easier because I can just say God. That, you have there's a divine order to things. There's
Mm.
natural or biological things that men have natural strength, not to mention all the other things like how you see things differently. Your
Mm.
skin is actually thicker than women's, literally. There's a lot of there's a lot of things about you biologically that
Mm.
explains why men have had the role they've had in history. But sometimes men just need to hear that, especially from a woman in 2024, you know? So men are easier, but women, they need a complete revamp of their understanding of who they are,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
No, no, yeah. Well, so I guess so when I get social media and I don't know, like all these women, I guess now who are saying like, look at all the money that I make and look at everything I have, like all this materialism, because that's all I'm getting out of it is like these women are basically saying, look at all the material that I have. And don't
Right.
don't 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 care about like how I got it, but look at the material that I have, which to me is like, okay, take all that away. Like, what are you?
Mhm.
What is left of you if you take away all the money? Because like a good question I would say to ask that person is, would you do that and enjoy it if you didn't make any of the money?
Mhm.
If you didn't make any of that money off of it, would you do that? And would it be a virtuous pursuit?
Mhm.
And I'm pretty sure most people would be like, no, I wouldn't do that. Like it's like when I
Mhm.
ask people if you got paid minimum wage and you never got an advancement in pay in the military, would you stay in it for 20 years and retire? All of them say no. And I'm like, okay, good. You're not doing it because you love the job then. You're doing it purely because you're getting compensated for it and you're getting advanced compensation over time. But
Yeah. And the attention. I think that that's
right.
one of the other payoffs is, at least in the beginning, is the attention that you get um from guys. But for a lot of women who might get into stripping, for example,
Mhm.
they don't realize that that turns into other things, like
Right.
drug addiction and then prostitution, and the money's there because
Mhm.
being compensated for doing
Well,
the extra.
it's like I mean there's a psychological toll on certain things, certain occupations and stuff, and like just serving in the military, for instance, like that's something that like it's gonna wear on you over time. I can't imagine being in any kind of like intimate occupation like stripping or escorting or OnlyFans or whatever. I can't imagine that that wouldn't affect you psychologically in a negative way. Like I would think over time it would. And um and I don't know if it's just like people are lying to themselves. Like when I've seen interviews of like female porn stars being like, oh my God, like, yeah, like this, that. And they're telling these bizarre details and stories and
Uh-huh.
supposedly how they felt about the whole thing. And I'm like, with a smile on their face. And I'm like, I don't know how
Yeah.
to feel about that, honestly. But then, like, you'll see people who regret how they feel about sharing all these like scenes of themselves with other people and how like they can't undo it. It's burned in their brain and people all over the world can now see it. forever, over and over and over again. And I can't see how that wouldn't be how that could be a good thing, let alone like how it wouldn't be a bad thing. Um, it's just really strange to me. I can't figure out um why people think that's a good idea, like why we should just allow it.
Yeah. Oh gosh. You know, I was thinking when you were talking about how do people lie to themselves?
Yeah.
Yes. And I say that because even when someone is in counseling and they're seeking help and they know something is wrong,
Mm,
they discover lies that they have been telling themselves that they needed my help to uncover,
mm,
you know. But people do lie to themselves about um their responsibility in their own hurt or pain, the role that they're playing, similar to that, what the lady that, um, or the situation rather, where there was a lady who was married and had anxiety, husband had anxiety about her husband cheating on her, and then she discovers he actually was.
mm,
And now she's dealing with a lot of gaslighting, a lot of back and forth. And obviously, you can imagine if you already have anxiety, that's making it even worse because
right,
she's not sure what to do. She's not sure she can live on her own and work on her own. But really, it's not that she can't do it, it's that she doesn't want to.
right, right.
This marriage thing, she wants it to work. Yes, it's for her children and for her boys, but it's also for her. Like she needs this to work because it represents safety for
Mm,
her, familiarity, and just because we're honest with ourselves about those things, that doesn't lessen our pain or the reality of it. It doesn't mean that what the husband did was right. You're not justifying anything, but you're also being honest that this back and forth is continuing to happen because you can't make a decision to leave someone that clearly doesn't love you.
mm,
That's the thing, is that you're doing that to yourself. So a lot of people lie to themselves
mm,
about situations, if that makes sense. So I can certainly imagine if I were to sit down with a porn star, or I sit down with anybody who is living a double life or living a life that they know is shameful deep down,
mm,
their smiles and their conversation doesn't really faze me because I know if I talk to you long enough and you feel safe
mm.
in that environment, you're gonna you're gonna spill the beans. you know. So
Well, that's some I don't know why I never asked you that before, but I oh, we're running out of time. Um, I've had a lot of conversations with women on like on TikTok, I think it was. Yeah, back in the day. It was like probably over a year and a half ago, but women would say like give me these awful scenarios of being in a relationship, a marriage, and I would just tell them like okay, leave. Just like if it's that much abuse, if that kind of stuff's going on, I can't imagine why you would stay. And then they would start giving excuses in my mind. Like that's how I was reading it, was like, well, I can't afford this. And what about the children? And did so like my answer to that was you just need to make a decision. Like this sounds very manly, very masculine. Be like, just choose, just make a decision and just go with it. Just do it. But I don't know how common that is for like therapists or just like women talking to women about like they're in a bad situation, but at the same time, it's almost like they just want to complain and not do anything about it, which I know you're probably familiar with.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's one of the things that I know I sometimes vent to you about. It's just like, do these people want help or what? Like they're the vent sessions. And like I tell people, I don't mind you venting. I don't
Mm,
mind you coming here and sharing what's on your chest, because there are people that, that they don't have anyone else to talk about it with.
right.
Not someone that's a third party that's not attached emotionally and going to give, all types of advice. So yeah, but there are women who, and men, but there's, the people that I encounter, there's people who want change and there's
Mm,
people who just want to come and complain. right? About stuff going on
Right.
at their job or what their wife is doing or their husband is doing. But your husband, your wife, your employer, the CEO, they're not here. Even if they were, they're not changed for me or you, boo. So it is what it is with the job. So why are we spending so much time talking about this and emoting about this, but
Mm.
we're not working on what we can actually change, which is yourself,
Right.
perception. It's a
Okay.
thing. Hopefully that answered that question. But
Yeah. Well, it's like I said, it's one of those things that like I can't. I had a captain one time. He told me in a nutshell that like if you're gonna come up to someone with a complaint, you need to have like a resolution or you need to have an answer to the problem that you're
right.
complaining about. Because if you don't have a answer to the problem, a solution for the problem that you're going to complain about, you're just going to sound like a child, and nobody likes a whiny child to just be like, I don't like this. It's like, okay, that's cool, but we're all adults and there's a lot
Yeah.
of stuff we just got to deal with. Like, okay, that sucks,
Yeah.
but just deal with it.
No, very true. I
Um,
remember learning that at one of my jobs.
and I
But it
know,
was true.
and I can see a lot of people if they came to a therapist, they wouldn't want to just hear, "Sorry, you have to deal with that."
Right.
Like, it's a very like very quick into a session, I would imagine, where it's like, "Well, that's just something we can't do anything about that." But
Yeah. But they're basically you say that in a long way.
in a long
There's
format,
nothing we
yeah.
can do about that, but what we can do is change your perception. Because
Yeah.
an example I give, which when I'm doing cognitive behavioral therapy, which goes very well with Christian counseling or biblical counseling, because the
Mm,
Bible talks about renewing the mind, you can't actually renew your mind. But I give that example of two single ladies who one is like, all the good guys are taken, modern dating sucks, and I'm never going to find anybody. And then you have another single lady who's like, yes, it's difficult out there, but I'm going to wait for the guy that's right for me. I'm going to position myself to be in the best position, I guess, to meet this guy, for this guy to find me.
mm,
Meantime, I'm going to live my best life. Okay.
right.
A, B, right? Same situation, completely different mindsets. And I guarantee you one of them is a little bit more depressed than the other one, you
Hmm.
know, and probably keeps running into guys that are toxic. But that's because that's what you're settling for. But that's a whole nother thing. But same situation, different mindsets. It's actually a thing because that's the only thing you can change is your perception.
Right.
You can look for another job, you can improve your resume, you can improve your education, you can do things, you can do actions, but there's also the mindset that needs to change too. And that's what, I help them with all of those things. I can help you leave your job,
Right.
but in the meantime, I'm gonna need you to change your perception.
Right. Well, and that no, that makes sense because I know there's a lot of people. Yeah, well, I mean, you can just look at people and like if whether it's a rich entrepreneur or some crazy roided out guy like a Navy SEAL or Army Ranger or something. It's usually when it comes down to like why are they successful and why did they get what they want is because of their mindset. It's not about, well, they were genetically gifted or they were they were born into the right social community with
Right.
all the, environmental connections to make getting an easier path in life. Like it's rarely about that, and it's more about um your mindset and how it's going to affect your goals and what you actually achieve. Um, and I think that like most people, when they want uh when they have something that they complain about in life, they don't want to change. They like want a solution without having to change. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that's like a success thing where it's like they want to achieve something, but they don't want to do anything to achieve it. But if they could achieve it, it would make that flip that switch in their mind where they would go, "Oh, okay, I get it." Because I found that that's what success does is when you set a goal and you succeed in that goal, you go, "Oh, okay, now." And I don't know what that does neurochemically to you, but I would imagine it like
It does.
Literally changes your brain.
Yeah, I would imagine there's a dopamine connection there, but I think that is the problem, is that people don't want to achieve things.
Mm,
They want to have things,
right.
right? They just want to have things. That's why you have so many people jealous of this, that, and the third, and complaining about, oh, well, these people are more privileged than me, and blah, 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 blah. We want to have things, so we don't want to achieve things. Like we don't want to do the work that it takes to actually achieve them, no matter who's in our way.
Right.
Yeah, that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day.
Yeah. Yeah. 'Cause we've got like 2 minutes left.
Yeah, I know it. Well, we would talk forever.
Mm.
So the other one's already like 58 minutes long.
Yeah.
Well, I'm supposed to behave. I got 2 more minutes.
Yeah. Well, that was a very impromptu discussion.
Was.
I just gotta like have a notepad where when I think of stuff, I just write
Yeah,
it down. Yeah.
like, subscribe, share.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing. I want to keep this like very informal.